right place for an enhanced learning experience. The Cultivation Center for Leadership Development. Not just informational, but transformational.
Hello, this is Dr. Marky Royster. Thank you for joining us again with the Cultivation Center for Leadership Development. We will be talking about responsibility and accountability. There are 7 things that you should be aware of that you are accountable for. So let's begin. So what do you need to know up front? Responsibility and accountability are inseparable. That's number 1. They go hand in hand. Now, one cannot take on the responsibility for something or someone without expecting to be accountable for its outcome or its results. Likewise, one cannot assume accountability for something or someone without being responsible for a desired outcome. So we have this image here. I'll give you a moment to guess what it is, and we'll talk about this image at the end. All right, so one thing about responsibility is you need to know who or what is behind you. Who or what is behind you. And this would go for accountability as well. So we want to know who or what is behind you. Keep in mind, when you are responsible for something or when you are accountable for something, always remember you will have drafters. It's just like in racing automobiles, NASCAR, or those kind of things, or Formula One, whatever. Always know that there will be drafters behind you. What are drafters? They wait for perhaps an opportunity to usurp you. They're just drafters, okay? But on the other side of that, you may have bumpers. Bumpers, what is a bumper? They stay close enough so that at the right time, they can bump you out of position. This is why you need to know what you are responsible for and what you are accountable for. Now, on the positive side of that, you have pushers. Pushers, they know when to step in to give you energy and when to back away and defend you. Now, you have those who are behind you, but you also have those who are on side of you. Those who are on side of you could be collaborators. Those who are willing to share ideas with you so that the both of you or a group can reach a common goal. These are the people who are on side of you, working with you. You also have on the side of you collegial colleagues. They're cordial, okay? Those who interact with a part of your everyday function. You may not go out, you may not hang out, but they are cordial, they are colleagues, working beside you, along beside you. And then, of course, along those same lines, who work beside you, you think about competitors. Competitors, those who are actively recruiting and pursuing the same resources as you. They are competitors. But they do it for their own benefit. So that's one side. So we have those who are behind you. It can be good, it can be bad. You have those who work alongside you, again, good or bad. But then you have those who are ahead of you, mentor, which is a good thing, one who helps achieve or accomplish the level you desire. And he or she offers guidance and resources to help get you there. They are mentors. They've been there or they know something about what you're trying to achieve and they are willing to help you get there. Also ahead of you are advisors. One who offers you options based on their experiences and knowledge. And they inform you of the benefits and the risks of those options. And then those who may be ahead of you, keep in mind there may be adversaries. one who antagonizes you and your interests, one who trivializes your efforts and your accomplishments, one who resents you and think they can do it better. So we have those who are behind you, those who are alongside you, and then those who are ahead of you. Now, when it comes to responsibility specifically, just look at these three circles here. In the middle, we have what's called the core. The core. And when you have a core, usually we're talking about those who are confidants. They are key stakeholders. They are the final decision makers. They are part of your core, or you may be in someone else's core. There's a lot of trust. There's a lot of openness and transparency within the core. But then just outside the core, the other section of that would be the group. Now, these are also stakeholders, but they're also collaborators. And we also say that here is where you're going to find the brain trust. The reason why we call it the brain trust is because these are stakeholders who are collaborating to make something positive and better. They're trying to build a better widget or a better mousetrap. And they are collaborators, and they are a group. Now, the only part about this is within the group, you may find a potential usurper. You may find a person who wants to usurp the leadership or the authority who is within the core. Now, outside the group, you have the crowd. You have the crowd. These are internal and external customers, constituents, clients, and they could be friend or foe. When we talk about internal customers, we're talking about those who work along with you and they need your resources and you provide those resources. It's just like a company. You can have an HR department and the customers for the HR department may be the marketing department or research and development department or some other department within the company. These are your internal customers. You are there to service the internal customers. The external customers are those who come from outside of the organization to do business with your organization or your group or even your church. So you have the core. Peter, James, and John was Jesus's core. Jesus had enough confidence and trust in them that he took them up on the Mount of Transfiguration. James was the leader of the fledgling early church. Peter was given the keys to the kingdom. So these three men were powerful. They were part of Jesus's core. Peter, James, and John, we hear about them. Peter and John doing miraculous things after the day of Pentecost. But then outside of that, you had the other disciples. Not that they were bad, they were good. They were part of the collaborating team or the collaboration team. But they were the group. They were stakeholders. They were involved in ministry. And then outside of that, you had the crowd. You had the crowd. Now, here's something that you should remember and keep in mind when it comes to responsibility. Ask these questions and know the answer. You should always ask these questions periodically, and you should know the answer. Number one, what are you responsible for? You ask the question, what am I responsible for? You should know the answer. If you do not know the answer, you need to find out the answer relatively soon. If you've been working or doing something for 3, 4, 5, 10 years, or whatever it might be, and you ask that question, what am I responsible for? And you do not know it after 3 years, 5 years, what am I responsible for? Then that's not a good sign. That means that either you need to move on to something else or really get some clarification. Number two, how or in what way are you responsible? In other words, you're asking yourself, how or in what way am I responsible for this sections for this particular area, you should know the answer. In what way am I responsible? And number three, when are you responsible? When am I responsible for this particular function? So when we're talking about this third one, we're looking at boundaries. What are the boundaries? What are the limitations of my authority? Is it shared responsibility? Is there a gray area? There's black, there's white, we got that part, but then there is the gray area. Am I responsible for the gray area? What part of the gray area? These things you want to know when it comes to responsibility. Now, when taking on responsibility, you always want to know the reporting structure or the organizational chart. And you want to know at least three things. You want to know the roles of those who are on the organizational chart. You want to know their roles. Managers, senior managers, directors, VPs, supervisors, first line supervisors. You want to know the roles of those within the reporting structure. Number two, you want to identify the experts. Identify the experts. Now keep in mind, an expert may not be a leader. An expert may be simply a technician, an expert in his or her field. You want to get to know the experts because you will probably have to call upon them to get their expertise. So you want to know the roles, who operates in which role. You want to know the experts, but also you want to know the influencers. The influencers. Again, just like experts, an influencer may not have a leadership role. They may not be a supervisor or a manager or anything of that sort. We used to call them informal leaders, and we can still use that term today. They are simply influencers because they have insight, they know the pulse of the company, they know the pulse of the church. They are just influencers. People like them, people run things by them. Not that they're trying to take over, it's just that they have influence. So you want to know who the influencers are. You want to know who the experts are. You want to know who holds which role. Number two, you want to know when it comes to responsibility, when you're taking on responsibility, when it's a new mission, a new ministry, a new position in the corporate, in the private sector or public sector, you want to know what the mission is. You want to know the brand. What is your brand? What is the specialization? What are you exhibiting? What are you producing? What are you trying to produce, trying to show? What is the focus? What are you focusing on? There has to be a focus. If there's no focus, then you'd be all over the place. You'd be chasing rabbits and going down rabbit holes and here and there and everywhere. You want to know what the focus is so that you stay on focus. Perhaps you want to know what the specialty is as well. Specialty is as well, pardon me. You want to know what are the prevailing tenets, what are the scruples when you take on responsibilities? What are the do's and the don'ts? What are the ground rules? You want to know these things because you do not want to bring embarrassment on yourself, nor do you want to bring embarrassment on the entity that you represent. Finally, and this is very important, you want to know what's next. When you take on responsibility, you want to know what's next. What is next? In other words, you want to know what are the priorities. Now, if you're given one task and then another task and then another task, and you're given all of these different tasks, and you're told this is hot, this is urgent, this is most important. Well, if everything is most important, then nothing is important. You simply have to prioritize. You have to bring some sort of sense to the order of how do I pursue it? Which one is important? Is it urgent? Is it routine? Is it critical? You want to know those things. Okay? You want to know what the objectives are. What are the objectives? You have objectives, right? And then after a group of objectives, then you have a goal. Or you set a goal and then you have objectives to meet that goal. That's knowing what's next. Okay? And finally, we have priorities, objectives, and then, as I said again, we have goals. These are the things that you should know, okay, when it comes to responsibility. Now, you look at this particular slide here in front of you, you see this gentleman, everything is secure. Everything is secure. But just as he is secure, keep in mind there will always be opposition on the outside of what you're doing. We already established that. Okay? You have your core, you have your group, you have your crowd. Always know that there will be some sort of opposition. But if you're operating in what you're supposed to be doing, everything will work just fine. But do not be naive to think that there is no opposition out there. But when you're in harmony, when you are in sync, you can move to the left and you can move to the right and everything is fine. Here is where the challenge comes in. Here is where the issue comes in, is when there is a breach. When there is a breach, and if that breach is not dealt with, whether it's in, especially in a relationship, but whether you're working a job, whether you're working a ministry, whatever you're doing, if there is a breach, if you leave that breach open, eventually there will be infiltration. The reason why there's infiltration, reason why people have crept in is because you left the door open or you left a breach and you did not repair the breach. Why? Perhaps laziness, being lackadaisical, being passive. It could be procrastination. But you need to address those breaches because if you don't, infiltration will come. And then once infiltration comes, if that is not eradicated, next thing you're going to see is an overrun. You're going to be overrun by issues, overrun by things. Why? Because you did not secure the breach in the first place. Secondly, if you did not have time to repair the breach, you did not get out the infiltrators. You did not make correction to it. You have to do that. Otherwise, there'll be an overrun. And then after the overrun, there's occupation. There's occupation. And what was once clear, what was once obvious, and everything was grand, what was once secure is now gone. And the sad part about an occupation is that it shows no resemblance of that which was once secure. It's just completely gone. You have no idea of what was there. And had I not given you the progression of this, you would look at this thing and say, oh, I don't know, it looks like the earth, it looks like a planet. Who knows? Nobody knows. That's why you want to maintain security. Now, let's talk about accountability for just a moment here. Let's talk about accountability. There's some thumbs up and there's some thumbs down. There are 7 things that you really need to pay attention to and know that you are accountable for. Number one, you are accountable to God. Ecclesiastes 12:13-14 says, let us hear the conclusion of the whole matter. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is God's, or this is man's all. For God will bring every work into judgment, including every secret thing, whether good or evil. You are accountable to God. It may seem like people don't see what you do or the things, the way you behave and all of that, but God sees it all. God sees it all, God hears it all, God knows it all. Always keep in mind that you are accountable to God, and nothing, absolutely nothing, should come in the way to have you compromise your relationship with God. Even if you do not have a strong relationship with God, you will still be held accountable to God. So I have a few bad examples of those who were not accountable to God. Let's refer to Leviticus chapter 10, verses 1 through 3. It is the story of Nadab and Abihu. These were Aaron's sons. So it says here, then Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, each took his censer and put fire in it, put incense on it, and offered profane or strange fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. So fire went out from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. And Moses said to Aaron, this is what the Lord spoke, saying, by those who come near me, I must be regarded as holy, and before all the people, I must be glorified. So Aaron held his peace. Aaron, really the first priest, he could not say a thing about this because he knew that his sons were in error. He knew this. Accountability to God. Now you may say, why is this? What was the big deal? These two men, Nadab and Abihu, were doing temple work. They were operating what we would call in the church. But they were doing things that were completely against the will and the purpose and the plan and the holiness of God. They simply did not fear God, apparently, and they were punished for it. There is an accountability, and we must be accountable to God. Another story is of Hophni and Phinehas, or Phineas, I just pronounced it Phinehas, made the Ark of the Covenant a common thing. They made the Ark of the Covenant like a good luck charm. Hophni and Phinehas, or Phinehas, they were the sons of Eli the judge. And when the Ark of the Covenant was taken, they figured that they could take the Ark of the Covenant to war and they'll win. In other words, they carried the Ark of the Covenant around as if it was some charm, as if it was some good luck piece. But God wasn't going to be used as a good luck piece. God wasn't going to be just used. And that was when the Ark of the Covenant was taken by the Philistines or the Philistines. And this is where we get the term Ichabod, for the glory of the Lord left the place. They were not accountable to God. But we also have some positive people who were accountable to God. Joab was, although he lost practically everything. He lost his health, he lost his wealth, his family, but he still maintained his integrity because he feared God. He was accountable. Moses, accountable to God. Paul, the Apostle Paul, was accountable to God. He said, woe if I preach not the gospel of Jesus Christ. Elijah and Joshua, all of these men were accountable to God. Unlike Nadab and Abihu, unlike Hophni and Phinehas. So we also are accountable to the heavenly host. Number two, we are accountable to the heavenly host. You are accountable to the heavenly host. So notice what it says here in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29 through 31. Let no corrupt word proceed out of your mouth, but what is good for necessary edification, that it may impart grace to the hearers. And do not grieve the Holy Spirit of God, by whom you were sealed for the day of redemption. Let all bitterness, wrath, anger, clamor, and evil speaking be put away from you, with all malice. We are accountable to the heavenly host. How so? Do not grieve the Holy Spirit. The angels that God sends to comfort us and to protect us, do not grieve. So we have a bad example of this. We have, as an example, a pretentious priest during Jeremiah's day and Ezekiel's day. We have here Ezekiel chapter 8, verse 15 and 16. Notice what it says here. Verse 15, Ezekiel chapter 8. Then he said to me, have you seen this, O son of man? Turn again, you will see greater abominations than these. Verse 16. So he, meaning God, brought Ezekiel into the inner court of the Lord's house. And there, at the door of the temple of the Lord, between the porch and the altar, were about 25 men with their backs toward the temple of the Lord and their faces toward the east. And they were worshiping the sun toward the east. God showed Ezekiel in a vision how these people were worshiping things, worshiping the sun. We were not to should be worshiping the creation. We should be worshiping the Creator. So we are accountable to the heavenly host. We are. So we have some good examples. Abraham was respectful. So when the angels came and told him that they were on their way to look at Sodom and Gomorrah because God was going to destroy it, Abraham had enough respect for these angels. He had enough respect. Joshua, when he was about to go into Jericho, and he saw this figure, it was an angel. He saw this figure, and he wasn't quite sure, what to do. Are you on our side, or are you on the opposition side? Joshua asked. Basically, the angel basically ignored him. He says, I am the captain of the Lord's army. And he said, take off your shoes. And Joshua obeyed. He humbled himself. Why? Because he was accountable to the heavenly host. Cornelius is another example. When an angel came and spoke to him of the good things that were about to take place in his life, he was respectful of that. So we are accountable to God, number one. We are accountable to the heavenly host, number two. And we are also accountable to our spouse or our spouse. You are accountable to your spouse. Husband, wife, you are accountable. So let me just go back for a moment and read 1 Corinthians chapter 7. It says this, let the husband render to his wife the affection due her, and likewise also the wife to her husband. The wife does not have authority over her own body, but the husband does. And likewise, the husband does not have authority over his own body, but the wife does. Do not deprive one another except for consent for a time, that you may give yourselves to fasting and prayer, and come together again so that Satan does not tempt you because of your lack of self-control. 1 Corinthians chapter 7, verses 3 to 5. You are responsible to your spouse. So we have a bad example here. One is Vashti, her flagrant act to humiliate King Xerxes. She basically ignored him. He wanted her to show her off, to reveal some things. He was proud of her. And she basically just completely disrespected the man. Jezebel is a bad example. She usurped King Ahab's authority. He was a weakling, but she was all about herself and the gods that she represented. Not God, but the gods, small g. This may sound harsh, but it has merit in the application. Abraham abandoned Sarah. He abandoned Sarah and put her in a very precarious situation, to where she was taken into twice into another man's bedroom. We find that was tough. And he basically said, she's my sister. And when it was found out that the king was upset because God, if it wasn't for God's intervention, something horrible could have gone wrong with that. And God intervened. This lets us know, men, that we need to cover our wives. And this lets us know, sisters, that it is okay for your husband to cover you. For example, Adam left Eve uncovered. When Eve was being tempted, the Bible says Adam was right there. Adam was with her right there, but he did not cover her. He did not protect her. So those are bad examples. But then we have some good examples of accountability. That is Aquila and Priscilla. They worked as a husband and wife team. They worked together. Zipporah is a good example, because God was about to strike Moses dead. And if it wasn't for Zipporah to stepping in and doing what was required, the circumcision thing, Moses would have been in dire straits. God would have struck him dead. But Zipporah, his wife, stepped in to help him out. So number 4, accountability. You are accountable to your family. You are accountable to your family. So let's read 1 Timothy chapter 5, verse 8. But if any provide not for his own, and especially for those of his own house, he hath denied the faith and is worse than an infidel, or worse than an unbeliever. So we have one bad example is Eli. Eli did not chastise or correct his sons when he should have. He did not do it. But we have some good examples. Jonadab and the Rechabites, they would not go outside of the purpose and the plan and the authority and the guidance given by their father, their grandfather. The Rechabites, we find this in Jeremiah, the book of Jeremiah. They obeyed. David was accountable to his family when he was there in the cave of Adullam. He wanted to make sure that his mother and father were secured, so he made sure that they were taken into the land of Moab. Cornelius, he and his household were saved. He was held accountable, and he knew how important it was. Again, Aquila and Priscilla, you are accountable to your family. You are accountable, number 5, you are accountable to your neighbors. You are accountable to your neighbors. Let's see what Ephesians 4:25 says. Therefore, putting away lying, let each one of you speak truth with his neighbor, for we are members of one another. You are accountable to your neighbors. In our day and time, there was a time when neighbors knew each other. We all heard this before, but I think the question is a fair question. Do we really know our neighbors, the person who's on the left or to the right, or perhaps the person across the street? Do you know their names? We have a bad example is Achan in Joshua chapter 7. Achan took of the accursed thing. He took something that he should not have taken, and it caused a big uproar. 36 innocent men lost their lives. But not just these men. Just think about the spouses. Think about the nieces and the nephews and the relatives and those men who had friends. He wasn't a good neighbor at all. He was selfish. Another one is the woman who was willing to split the baby. We find this in 1 Kings chapter 3, where Solomon made a decision to spare the baby. But this one woman was willing to split the baby because her baby died. And so she kidnapped basically the other woman's baby. And she went back and forth, back and forth. And Solomon says, okay, I tell you what, I will split the baby in half. I'll give half to this woman and half to the other. But the real mother says, oh, no, just spare the baby, just spare the baby. But the woman who was lying said, oh, no, go ahead and split the baby. I'll take half and she can take half. Of course, Solomon knew that the real mother would not want that baby to die. The woman willing to split the baby was not neighborly at all. So we do have some good examples of being neighborly. The woman in debt who Elijah encountered and gave instructions. How was she a good neighbor? Apparently so, because she went to all of her neighbors and got a pot or a cup so that oil can be poured into it. Now, if she did not have a good relationship with her neighbors, I doubt if her neighbors would have given her anything. But she had enough respect amongst her neighbors that they were willing to give her whatever she needed so that she could survive. How powerful is that? The early church had things in common. They were neighborly. The early church, they were neighborly. They had everything in common or in community. Now, number 6, you are accountable to your employer. You are accountable to your employer. Let's refer to Colossians chapter 3, verses 22 through 24. Bondservants, obey in all things your masters according to the flesh, not with eye service as men pleasers, but in sincerity of heart, fearing God. And whatever you do, do it heartily as to the Lord and not to men, knowing that from the Lord you will receive the reward of the inheritance, for you serve the Lord Christ. You are accountable to your employer. So we have a few examples here, at least two bad examples. First of all, we have Ahithophel. Ahithophel is a good example of a bad example. Ahithophel was David's senior advisor, and he betrayed David. He took the side of Absalom, betrayed David, and revealed top secret information about David, how to overthrow David. He was bad. It wasn't anything good at all. The thing about Ahithophel is he was described as having the voice or the mind of God. He was that brilliant, that smart, that insightful. Yet he betrayed his boss, who was David. Joab is another example, bad example. He was King David's army general. And Joab was wishy-washy. He was fickle. He did some things that he was not supposed to do. He killed Abner, and he killed Absalom when he was not given the authority to do so. Bad examples. He was under King David's leadership, but yet he wasn't accountable. He was just out there. He was a renegade of sorts. And finally, as a good example, we have Ruth. She was very faithful. She was out there gleaning during harvest time, and she was noticed for her hard work, her diligence. She was noticed. Tychicus, one of Paul's couriers, faithful man, always doing the right things. Aristarchus, another faithful man, another one of Paul's couriers, faithful all the way to the end. So finally, when it comes to accountability, I want to talk about this last accountability, and it is you are accountable to colleagues. You are accountable to your colleagues. So we take note from 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verse 22 through 20, verse 22 to 22, and then verse 26. Here it is. But now indeed there are many members, yet one body. And the eye cannot say to the hand, I have no need of you, nor again the head to the feet, I have no need of you. No, much rather, those members of the body which seem to be weaker are necessary. And if one member suffers, all the members suffer with it. Or if one member is honored, all the members rejoice with it. So let me just give you 3 bad examples of those who were not accountable. One is Alexander the coppersmith. We find this in 2 Timothy chapter 4, verse 14 through 16. This person, Alexander the coppersmith, did much harm to the Apostle Paul. Not much detail is given, but we can pretty much glean that he did not support Paul. He did not come to Paul's defense. He basically abandoned Paul, undermined the Apostle Paul. Alexander the coppersmith is a perfect example of one who was not accountable. Diotrephes, another person who was given a leadership role, but when the Apostle John was attempting to send people as emissaries to give him a message, perhaps to encourage, to bring some more guidance, Diotrephes would not hear anything that the Apostle John had to say. In fact, he not only rejected these emissaries, but he would not allow the emissaries to speak to the people. So John says, well, I'll deal with him when I go there. But he was not accountable to colleagues. Abimelech is another one. We find this in the book of Judges, chapter 9. Just simply not a person of accountability. But we have the good examples of people who were accountable. Peter, Titus. Titus basically almost saved the Corinthian church because Paul was so upset and disappointed with some of the things going on. And it was Titus who went to the church. He went to Corinth to speak to them, to encourage them. And he gave Paul a report, and everything was amended. Joshua and they held up Moses' arms rather. So these men were accountable. So we do have these things that we are accountable for. And I want to go back to number 1. We are accountable. We are accountable to God. So take heart with this: responsibility and accountability. Responsibility and accountability. Whether it's ministry, whether it's private sector, whether it's public sector, in your family life, you are accountable. Primarily, most importantly, to God. I say thank you, God bless you, and I hope this encourages you to know your responsibility and know that you are accountable. God bless you.